welcome back to Insurrection with Brent Lengel, carried on the Starcom radio network. I'm your host, Brent Lengel, and you just heard the Dropkick Murphys with Outcast. And now we are back to the show, and we are joined with a very special guest. This is my favorite segment of the day. This is Creative Destruction or Destructive Creation. This is where I interview someone from the activist or the artist underground. And in this case, we have a guy I've been wanting to get on the show for quite a while. I'm glad he finally joined us. This is Caleb Maupin. Caleb is a radical journalist and an analyst. He's worked with Russia Today, and I've seen him through a number of media outlets, and he did a lot of really awesome work at the park and continues to be radical even after the end of Occupy Wall Street. So, Caleb, thank you very much for being on the show. You want to say hi to our audience?
Sure. I'm glad to be here. Let's have a good discussion.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, Caleb, I first met you at the Yippie, the Yippie Museum Cafe, and we were doing a simultaneous critique of the President Obama and Romney's debate. And you had some
I remember.
And you had some really, really great things to say, and one of the things that first stuck out to me was, one, how intelligent you are, but two, the fact that you were making some arguments that were heard at Occupy, but maybe were somewhat unique, because you are, in fact, a Leninist. Is that correct?
Yes, I identify as a Marxist-Leninist.
All right, excellent, excellent. Now, I will say Insurrection is an anarchist show, but we are very, very friendly to our Marxist-Leninist comrades. So why don't you tell me what brought you to that ideology? How did you first get involved in activism, and did you start out as a Leninist, or was that something that sort of developed over the years?
Well, it's really hard to say exactly how it started. I mean, the first political activism I ever engaged in, I'm from Ohio. And my mother was a librarian in Ohio, and she went on strike. She and her fellow librarians in Canton, Ohio, went on strike as part of the SEIU, the Service Employees International Union. And I was in fourth grade at the time, and I walked the picket lines with my mom, and I guess that was the first political activism I ever did. And I was introduced to the union struggle at a very young age. But, I've always been kind of a bookish kind of guy, I guess. I do a lot of reading. And I would also say that, when there's an injustice that goes on, whether it's, police brutality, whether it's, the fact people not having enough food, the homelessness, you see these things and it fills you with outrage. That's part of being human. The system tries to teach us to just kind of turn off our emotions and look the other way when we see things that are not right. But in reality, it's a basic human sense of solidarity that when you see people suffering, you want to do something about it. And so if Marxism-Leninism, the ideology of communism, all real anti-capitalist ideology is based on the idea that we want to get beyond all of these horrors and try to construct a society where people have what they need. And Marxism-Leninism is an attempt to get to that and to do it scientifically and to use the laws of historical development to try and analyze society and figure out how we can push humanity toward a system where people don't suffer as much.
Absolutely, and that's a very, very worthy goal. Now, what is it specifically that attracts you about Leninism as opposed to, say, social democracy or anarchism? What is it in particular that you like about that ideology?
Well, I think it gets down, Marxism-Leninism is based on, like I said before, a scientific understanding of the way the world works. Since the beginning of time, there have been people kind of dreaming up their model for what an ideal society would look like. Plato had the Plato Republic, Sir Thomas More, Utopia, and anyone with a pen can sit down and design what they would like the ideal society to be like. But what Marx and Lenin, and then the revolutionaries that came after them, whether it's Fidel Castro or Kim Il Sung or others, what they contributed was they actually were able to kind of bring it into being, and they were able to do it by basing it on actual struggles that go on. And in modern society, you have two classes. You have the working class, those of us that's the majority of humanity, the 99%, those of us with nothing to sell but our labor power. And then you have the billionaires class, the 1%, the small group of people with nothing. They don't work, they just own. They own the world, and the rest of us serve them. And Marxism-Leninism is the understanding that, that among the 99% of the working class, there are some of us who can come to that understanding and can come to see that you need a revolution to get rid of the 1% and take society in a different direction. But that section, that advanced section needs to pull the rest of the 99% ahead. People don't just wake up one day, fall out of bed, and say, oh, we ought to have a revolution and change the world. People need to be pushed in a revolutionary direction, and that takes a revolutionary party. And the other thing that makes Marxism-Leninism unique is that it takes into account the national question. It's not just the workers and the bosses. It's not just the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. It's also nations. The first world. The Western countries, the United States, Germany, Britain. These countries are countries that exploit most of the rest of the world. There's a big divide between the oppressed and colonized countries of the world and the imperialist countries.
Yeah,
and
I'd like to come back to that. Can you hold on for just a second there? Because that
Sure.
is a very good point. We're going to be talking about that, and we're going to be talking a little bit more on the show after this interview closes. But what I wanted to get into here was a little more of a local issue. Cecily Mcmillan, specifically the trial of Cecily Mcmillan, which began on Monday. Now you have been covering this trial, is that correct?
Yeah, I wrote an article for RussiaToday.com. I've been there. I've been there on 2 days. I tend to be there a lot more as the trial continues.
Absolutely. And I don't know, I've talked about sort of my impression of the courtroom and kind of how it seems to be sculpted almost scientifically, but not scientifically in necessarily a way. When you first look at the court and you look at the way the procedure functions, you think, oh, they've got all of these systems in place to prevent bias, like a scientist would. And then all of a sudden, but what I'm starting to notice here with the court itself is that a lot of these rules that they're setting up is less to eliminate bias, but more to build bias in one very specific direction. From the way the court resembles church to the giant column behind the judge with the big old "In God We Trust" in the back. It seems to me that what they're doing is they're not so much eliminating bias as what they're doing is they are instructing people to obey and to think in a very specific way. Now, did you get that same sense from the court when you were watching the process?
I did. I mean, I've gone to court with many different cases. When I was an activist in Cleveland, I went to court with police brutality victims on a regular basis. That was part of my activism in Cleveland. And you see how these courts function. And, they really try to dress up what is really a brutal process. Right now, we're in a point where capitalism, they're not making profits from employing people and giving people jobs and all that. So they're making profits from locking people in jail. And they've dressed it up. They've got all these procedures and rituals to make it look like it's some sacred thing. But reality is what the business of the courts and the police and all of that are doing, that's the business of locking people in prison so that big corporations can make money from locking people up. It's not justice. It's not this beautiful, blind woman with a mask over her face. We're dealing with the brutal reality that capitalism at this point is making profits from locking people in jail, and there are over 2.5 million people in prison in this country. So the capitalists can make a profit. There are millions of people who are unemployed, and that's the reality. And that's what these courts do, is they serve that reality. And we're seeing that in the court. I mean, that's what the courts are set up to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Cecily in particular, one of the things that I was kind of shocked at was that they were still pressing this case. Knowing Cecily and knowing her history and with what is being claimed that she's done, I'm very, very surprised that the prosecution is still pushing this and hasn't dismissed it or offered her any kind of a deal that would get her out of this situation. So why is it that you think that they're pressing this? Are they protecting themselves from a lawsuit, or is there something else that's going on here?
I think this is very much about intimidation. Occupy Wall Street, the occupation of Zuccotti Park, has been over for a long time. The movement, the occupation hasn't been happening, but there's a real feeling that if they can take somebody and really just make an example out of them, say, you speak out, you protest, this is what's going to happen to you, and give it all kinds of publicity. If they can do that, they're going to feel really good about themselves. It's about intimidating. It's about scaring all the young people, all the oppressed people in this country who might want to join Occupy Wall Street-like demonstrations, to make them afraid, to make them full of fear. In my article on RussiaToday.com, I compared what's being done to Cecily Mcmillan to what happened on the floor of the Ukrainian parliament on Monday. You know, the day that Cecily Mcmillan's trial opened on Monday was the same day in the Ukrainian parliament. There was somebody who got up and denounced what the new U.S.-backed regime in the Ukraine did, and they were dragged from the floor of parliament by Nazis and beaten up. Right? It's the same thing, rule by terror, intimidation. And that's what's going on, and that's why they're pushing this case. They would very much like to terrorize people from participating in demonstrations.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, when they can do this, and if they say, especially, you know, coming from Cecily, who seems to be the most innocuous person, the last person you'd ever expect to involve herself in a violent assault on a police officer, in a lot of ways it seems that they're saying, you know, look, we're going to put her in jail, and if we can put her in jail, we can put any one of you in jail, so you better just stay away. So I think that you really do, you really kind of tied into specifically what this is about, which is intimidation. Now, what I'd like to question you about is there's been an idea that's been floating around about the trial, jury nullification. Specifically what this is where a jury says to them among themselves, yes, we know what the law is. Yes, we know that how the procedure of the court works. Yes, we know that the prosecution has come and made a good case and has proven this person guilty, and we believe them to be guilty, but we still will not render a guilty verdict because we disagree with the very premise of the trial and we disagree with the person being blamed for this crime. Now, do you think it's likely that we'll have a jury nullification from the jury that we have on Cecily's? And is this a weapon that the people can use to strike back against a massively corrupt justice system?
Well, I don't know that much about jury nullification, but from what you just described, I don't think it would apply in this case at all, because I think she's absolutely not guilty of the crimes that she's being charged with. And I think that we're going to see the evidence be presented by the defense that will make that absolutely clear. I think that she did not assault a police officer. These are trumped-up charges, and she herself was very brutally beaten by the police. She was on Democracy Now! After having her ribs broken, after having that famous hand-shaped mark on her breast. The police are the ones who assaulted her. She did not assault the police. And I think that Martin Stoller, her lawyer, is going to do a very good job of making that clear.
Yeah, he absolutely is, and I will say, watching the beginning of the trial, his skill was really, really clear, and I think the DA was a bit surprised at how good he was at what he was doing. So let me shift gears here, because I don't want to spend all of our time. We got about 2 minutes left. You represent an organization called FIST, which is the best acronym, by the way. So why don't you explain specifically what FIST is?
Well, FIST, we're a revolutionary youth organization. It stands for Fight Imperialism, Stand Together. FIST, our website is fightimperialism.org, very easy, fightimperialism.org. And we're youth from all over the country. We've got people in North Carolina, Philadelphia, we got people in Los Angeles, all over the country who are organizing, fighting against this system. And when you get down to it, when we talk about fighting for justice, you're fighting against imperialism. Imperialism is the system where a small group of wealthy bankers run the world economy. The world economy is centered around making a few people on Wall Street and in the London Stock Exchange very, very wealthy. And if you're opposed to that system and the wars and the brutality and the poverty that comes with it, that's what we're all about. It's fighting imperialism, and that's what Lenin said about capitalism. It's monopoly stage. It is imperialism. And so, we're a national group, young people, started in 2004, and we've been going ever since. So that's what FIST is all about.
All right, perfect. And we're coming right on down to the end of this, but so what I'm wondering is if one of our listeners wants to get in touch with you, Caleb, how can they reach you?
Oh, they can just visit my website, CalebMaupin.info, CalebMaupin.info. That's my website. There's a contact me form on there if they want to visit that, or they can just go to the website, fightimperialism.org, and they can check that out there, and they can reach me through there as well. So, and we're happy to get involved in any struggle that's happening. Cecily Mcmillan is not guilty of what she's being charged with, and more people need to come out and support her and make clear that they're not going to intimidate us from going out and protesting, that we will stand against the crimes being committed by the wealthy and the 1%.
Absolutely, and that is the best way to end a segment. This has been Creative Destruction or Destructive Creation. You are listening to Insurrection with Brent Lengel, carried on the Starcom radio network, and that was Caleb Maupin.